as a mentor, you have to resist the idea to live vicariously through your mentee. So many mentors fall into the trap of saying, well, Terry, if I were you, I would do this. You're not living vicariously. You want to make sure you understand and listen with empathy. What is your mentee trying to accomplish? The best mentors are the ones that enter gently. They're aware of their personality, their tone, their rate, their pitch, their speed, their idiosyncrasies, and they dial it down.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I just interviewed the most fascinating person. I think you guys are going to really, really enjoy this interview. His name is Scott Jeffrey Miller, and he wrote this book and other books, but the book we're talking about today, which actually comes out today, is called The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship, 13 Roles to Making a True Impact. And I found the entire interview completely fascinating. And whether you are a mentor, have been a mentor, want to be a mentor, or have been mentored, which I feel like many of us have been, whether it's casually or whether it's officially, he just has so much wisdom to share about how to do it well. He's done so many things in his life. He's got a very popular podcast on leadership I think it's the top podcast that there is on leadership. And he's had over a 30-year career, basically in leadership. And now he's sort of branching out and sharing all of his information with us in this interview. So I hope that you enjoy this interview with my pal, Scott Jeffrey Miller, as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. I'm so excited to welcome Scott Jeffrey Miller to the Terri Cole Show. Hi, welcome.
Terry, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite and sharing your spotlight with me today. Honored to be here.
Well, you've done a lot in your one life, and you're not even that old, Scott. I got to say, I was going through I was just telling the audience at the top, like all the things that you've done. But what I love so much about your experience is that you have so much varied experience. Like you have your hand in a lot of different pots, which speaks to a very curious mind. So let's talk about this.
A curiously distracted mind, maybe.
Indeed. But today is an auspicious day because it is the birth of your eighth book, The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship, 13 Roles to Making a True Impact. Congratulations.
Thank you. I think it's actually number 6. Number 7 is coming out in the fall, number 8 in the spring. So I try to keep about a two a year book cadence, right? And keep it fresh. I'm privileged that HarperCollins is publishing this book. I'm passionate about mentoring. I've been on the receiving end of great mentoring my entire life. And I think it's a commonality that successful people have in their careers. So excited to talk about it today.
Me too. So let's talk about why. So why this book and why now?
It's an extraordinarily great question to open with. I'll tell you, honestly, the publisher approached me. Like you, I'm privileged to host a podcast. It's the world's largest leadership podcast called On Leadership with Scott Miller. And every year I write a book for HarperCollins called Master Mentors, where I shine my spotlight on 30 guests and write a book with their permission about them called Master Mentors. The 3rd volume is coming out this fall. Well, HarperCollins came to me and said, hey, we think you should write a book about mentorship. And I said, well, I'm writing like 4 books right now. Like, what do you mean? Are you sure? And so they said, well, you want to think about it? I said, sure, for a minute. Hey, when a publisher comes to you and says, will you write a book for us? The answer should generally be yes. And so I had some passion around leadership. Spent 3 decades of my career in the leadership world and the coaching world, career development. And so I sat down and thought, well, if I was going to write about mentorship, what would I write about that's different? Believe it or not, the market was not flooded with valuable books about mentorship. Although 80% of all Fortune 5,000 companies have a organized mentor program, not to mention the Russell 2000 and the Inc. 5000. So I realized, you know what, there's different roles that mentors play. So I'm going to name those roles and give people not a mastery, but a working knowledge on which role might you play and when and how, and do you even play these roles all the time or not? So it's a very light book. I don't write seminal gravity earth-shattering books. I don't read those kind of books either. So I tend to write the kind of books that I would use and enjoy. And here you have it.
All right. So let's talk about roles.
So there's 13. There was originally 15, and my review committee passed out And when they came to and they said, Scott, you cannot have 15 roles. You've just spent 30 years as Dr. Covey's chief marketing officer, 7 habits of highly effective people. No one dares venture to 8. Well, with extraordinary courage, Terry, I got it down to 13. And so the good news is, right, some of them are inherent, some of them cross over. They're not all seminal ideas, but they're great reminders. And really quickly, as you know, the roles are the revealer, the boundary setter, the absorber, the questioner, the challenger, the validator, the navigator, the visionary, the flagger, the distiller, the activator, the connector, and the closer. Yep. And there's each chapter, it takes you 15 minutes to read it, but I give you a lot of working knowledge around when to employ this role, when to avoid it. And there's no magic to the sequence. Role number 6 does not happen in mentoring session number 6. 1 and 13 are kind of, bookends, but generally it's a start anywhere, go everywhere kind of formula.
I love it. What I think is so fascinating about this book and about the now is that exactly what you said. There are so many of us. I've mentored many people. I've been mentored by many people. And, we sort of just do what comes naturally because it's been in a less sort of structured way. And yet I love what I'm reading in this book about different ways that we can add value to the lives of people that we are mentoring, and what they actually need from us. But for you personally, have you always sort of been a mentor? Have you had the personality of someone? What would you say that is? A helper, someone who wants to be of service? What is your personal journey on this?
I usually am asked the question, what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? And they're subtle, right? A coach typically is someone that's had his training, a certification, they have a methodology, it's a business for them, they charge for it. Mentorship is similar, but as you know, it's a little more magnanimous. It's usually always pro bono. It usually is someone more seasoned paired with someone more junior, but not always. I'm often asked about the role of reverse mentorship. And I say, well, there's no such thing. It's just called mentorship because I have a lot of 20-year-olds in my life that are mentoring me on Chat GPT and AI and Six Sigma. So it's just called mentorship. To answer your question, I do think that I've functioned longer than I recognized as a mentor to others. But that kind of speaks to how we define mentorship, doesn't it? Because in some cases, you work at Oracle or Disney and you're part of a prescribed mentor program with 30 up-and-comers and 30 C-suite executives. And here, meet each other. Terry, you're Scott's mentor. Good luck to you. And what happens too often is Terry knows how to lead. Terry's been a leader in a large company. But leadership skills don't always translate over into mentorship. When I think of a great leader, I think of someone who has a strong vision, that understands how to execute processes, systems, strategy. They ask piercing questions. They get to the root cause. They accelerate quickly in information. In many cases, those are really well-placed skills in a corporate environment, but they're a train wreck in a mentorship environment. So your question is piercing, and I probably think I've been a mentor to more than I recognize. But I define mentorship really broadly because your mentor can be your rabbi, it can be your pastor, it can be your college professor, it could be your leader. It also could be someone you've never met. It could be someone whose podcast you listen to or whose conference you go to because you love to see their TED Talk come alive on stage. So I'd encourage your audience to not closely define mentorship because it's a broad opportunity to be a transition figure in someone's life.
Yes, I always experienced mentorship, at least in my own role as a mentor, as I'm really holding these folks in high esteem, that there is a part of me that has a deep belief in their capabilities and sort of holding that hope for them, besides teaching and all the other things that go along with it, where with coaching, I don't necessarily have the same sort of warm feeling that mentorship brings for me personally.
Yeah, they're different, right? And they serve different purposes. You touched on the key premise of this book, which is as a mentor, you have to resist the idea to live vicariously through your mentee. So many mentors fall into the trap of saying, well, Terry, if I were you, I would do this, or if I was you. And you're not living vicariously. You're not trying to turn your mentor into the second chance for you, right? You want to make sure you understand and listen with empathy. What is your mentee trying to accomplish? Now, they may come
Yes.
to your call or your first session clear that their lifelong goal was to become a patent attorney. Okay, great for you. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Great. Or they may come and say, I'm thinking of being an orthopedic surgeon or a massage therapist. Okay, those are very different paths, right? One takes 5 months, one takes 15 years. Let's talk about that. But the best mentors are the ones that enter gently. They're aware of their personality, their tone, their rate, their pitch, their speed, their idiosyncrasies, and they dial it down. And they sometimes extend an unnatural level of patience where they're just kind of softly, like a paleontologist, like an archaeologist. They're sort of just like using brushes, and they're brushing away talents and fears and passions and traumas and concerns, not as a therapist, not as a physician, but just really making sure that the journey to patent attorney is in fact your lifelong goal. And when I'm sure of that, let's get it on. Let's make it happen. Right. How can I help you?
So where do you think, as mentors, honesty about our own shortcomings or our own failures, does that have a place in the mentee-mentor relationship?
As a licensed social worker, you know that timing is important, right? Is building the rapport, the trust. There's a lot of debate on whether or not you can build a safe space for someone, and that term has been in a lot of debate right now. But I do think vulnerability is a mentorship competency.
Yep.
And once you have earned the trust of your mentee, I think it's vital to say, hey, let me share an example that happened in my journey that may or may not have some insights we could tease out together for what is your journey, because our journeys are different.
Yep.
I think it's very important to know, when are you sharing a challenge or an experience in your journey that is being used to help your mentee either replicate that or move around that based on what they're trying to accomplish. Do it judiciously, call it what it is, put some parameters around it, teach through it, and then move on.
Yes, that's beautifully, very articulately.
It's intimidating talking to you because you have a lot of education around, how to have structured conversations, how to create safe spaces, how not to let your own fears intervene with your clients. And so I'm mindful of your expertise as compared to mine.
But here's the thing, though. The way that you just framed that out, honestly, is perfectly safe and emotionally healthy. I'm always looking at, and from a therapeutic point of view as well, I remember having a brilliant teacher at NYU when I was getting my master's. And I said, what would you personally share about yourself with a client? Because you'll have some people who say nothing ever, don't ever do that. That's wrong. But this guy who was in the trenches doing it, had written many books. He said, I would share anything if I thought it would actually move the needle for them or help them in some real way. And the mindfulness that you have around that is that you're not co-opting the person's session. You're not burdening the client or the mentee with some unresolved crap that you may still be carrying. Like you can't need anything. I feel like as a therapist, and very similar as a mentor, you can't need anything psychologically or emotionally from your client, right? You're there for them. So you can't need them to make you feel okay. And of course, listen, from therapy and mentors, there's going to be a lot of wounded healers out there, because not everyone, does all the work, or not everyone is healed enough to be doing what they're doing. But I think that that's a good rule of thumb, right? Is to realize if you don't need anything except for them to show up, do the work, participate in the relationship. Having regular expectations obviously is fine, but you can't psychologically or emotionally need anything from them and be effective in that role. I don't think. That's my 2 cents.
I think that's beautifully said. In one of the later roles, I call it the closer, which is the last role, right? Celebrating wins, documenting growth and maturity. I think it's important as a mentor to be able to identify something you did learn from your mentee, that it wasn't all one way. Is that as a result of, having mentored you Terri, on this journey, let me tell you some things that I've learned from you. some skills that you've demonstrated, I think it's important to validate your mentee genuinely. If
Yep.
there are areas where you can validate them, to say, I've taken this away, so it doesn't feel like a one-way process.
I love the closer so much. I love that idea. I love the concept. It's so powerful because the thing is, when you're in a position of power, you've had accomplishments in your life or whatever, there can be a tendency for other people to really want to put you on a pedestal,
Mm.
to really feel like where you are is super far away from where, or you've never struggled with those things, or you wouldn't have made the mistakes that they made. And I think that there's something incredibly generous and heartfelt
Mm.
about being able to honestly
Yeah.
give back that gift to the mentee, because of course, if it's a good relationship, of course you're learning from
Yeah.
them, right? Like you said, 20-year-olds or my nieces are teaching me stuff all the time, not just about chat AI, but about social media, all the things,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I'm always
Yeah.
texting them like, is it okay to say this word now, or is that word out? Like, help. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to ask you personally, though, Scott, with all the things that you've done, are there any mentors? Like, who has been a mentor, an important mentor for you, and why?
So I probably have dozens of them. Some of them named as mentors, some of them not, but I'll share one off the top of my head. The greatest mentor I ever had was, in fact, someone that never met me
Mm.
and didn't even know I exist. When I was in my adolescent years, I was born and raised in Central Florida. Not that that matters to this, but there was a gentleman named Bruce Williams. And he really kind of started talk radio long before Dave Ramsey, long before Sean Hannity. He was apolitical. He was a small town mayor and entrepreneur. His name was Bruce Williams. He actually made Sally Jesse Raphael a star on radio long before the craziness on television. And Bruce Williams had a call-in talk show every night, Monday through Friday, from 6 to 9 p.m. And while all my junior high school friends were listening to, ABBA or U2 or whatever it was, I was listening to Bruce Williams take calls after call after calls. I've just declared bankruptcy. What do I do? I've just inherited money from my grandmother. What do I do? How do I qualify for a mortgage? Do I need an attorney when I buy a home? And it was just general business acumen. So 5 days a week, 3 hours a day for 8 years, I absorbed all this remarkable knowledge. And so Bruce Williams taught me so much long before college, long before being a C-suite officer in a public company. I knew a bunch about how to read a P&L, how to calculate margin, what is the difference between gross revenue and net income. And so Bruce Williams died having never even known Scott Miller existed. But to this day, hands down, he's the most influential mentor in my life because I chose to make him my mentor, which I think you can do. Anybody can be your mentor without agreeing to. Read their
Yes.
books, listen to their podcast, watch their TED Talks. They can have a profound influence on you, and you can complement that with pardon me, a more formal mentorship.
Yes.
Terri, I'm trying to become a licensed social worker. Could you spend a few hours mentoring me through the process of admissions into a legitimate program?
Right.
Both of those can exist simultaneously.
It's amazing that you mentioned someone who didn't know you, that and how profoundly impactful that person's offering to the world was for you. I've done a lot of training with Deepak Chopra, who I consider a mentor, and he talks about choosing these people. So much of the time, they're people we've never met, whether it's Oprah, whether it's, we're just talking about Martha Stewart, whoever the person is, whether it's Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and identifying the qualities that you see in them. And then sort of there was a whole like, kind of a spiritual thing that we were doing at this retreat where you're inviting them, those good qualities, to incarnate sort of through your experience. And now that's more of a mystical way of putting it. I also feel like any person who comes to me for anything that they want to do in their life, I always say, find someone who's already done it. They haven't done it your way, but pretty much someone out there has already done what you want to do, and learn how they did it. And again, doesn't mean you're going to do it that exact way, but the internet is free, right? There is so much information that we can get. So I love the idea of anybody listening or watching this on YouTube, of if you want something, if there are qualities, if there is some acumen that you are seeking to gain, go look for it. Right. And yes, hopefully in real life, you can find real life mentors as well. But this is real information. Like the change in you in your middle school life, Scott, that was real, right? What you
Profound.
learned.
Profound.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. So, question for you: who have you been a mentor for, and what impact do you think that you have had? And I'm sure there's many, but if you want to choose them.
There are many, some formal, but the first thing that came to my mind are my three sons. So my wife and I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have three boys that are 8, 10, and 12. Don't do that. Do not do that. Do not have three boys in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
My wife had these boys, and so I think there's a difference between parenting and mentorship, right? I don't enjoy parenting. I write about it. I blog about it. I podcast about it. I love my boys. I do not enjoy parenting most days. It's not my natural calling in life. I feel very comfortable talking about that. But I do think there's a little bit of a difference between parenting and mentoring, because as a parent, I'm often in selling mode, influence mode, persuasion mode. Do this, do that. We're going here, we're going there. Tuck your shirt in, put your deodorant on. I'm raising gentlemen. There's a lot of parenting going on. And then I think with these three sons, I hope to become their mentor. I hope they see me as a seasoned leader, as an author, as a speaker, as a podcast host. When my books launch, whether it sells 6,000 copies in the first week or 60 copies, we talk about it. We laugh about it. We talk about it. We unpack it. And so I think with my sons, I'm trying to both be their parent and their mentor to help pull out what it is they want to accomplish. One loves basketball, one loves tennis, one loves both. One loves reading, one doesn't. And so I'm really trying. I'm sure these are kind of blending together, but maybe I'm answering your question, who I hope to be a mentor to, which is my three sons. But I have certainly mentored a lot of associates as well, those who work for me and those who don't. I would not advise typically to have your leader be your mentor. I think those are two separate roles. I think unless you have a Herculean level of maturity in your leader, I would separate your direct report boss from your mentor.
Yeah. I think
that's a whole different conversation, right?
That is a whole different conversation. I want to go back to the parenting thing though for a second, because I think it's interesting how we want to, I have three sons as well. We want to mentor our kids when they get to be the age when there's less parenting to do. But in real life, what's actually happening, whether we want to or not, we are massively influencing those young lives. And I think we can do it consciously. We're doing it unconsciously, where those kids are repeating the things that they've seen. I remember because I married a widower who had three young sons, and his wife died when they were 5, 3, and 1. So they did what you said not to do as well. But I came in when they were like 12, 14, 16, or 15. Wow. And that was 25 years ago. So we have 7 grandbabies now. But the process of influencing kids, I remember saying to my mother when, I was madly in love with my husband, obviously, because I was like, you could have 32 teenagers. It's going to be amazing. Love will find a way, Scott. That's what I was thinking. And I remember calling my mother, maybe it was year 2, and I was like, oh my God, this is not what I signed on for. This is hell. So hard. They were acting out and all the things. Of course, I got everyone into family therapy and did the things that I could do to influence. But my mother was like, yeah, actually, this is exactly, P.S., what you signed up for. I was like, oh, yeah. And she was like, Terri, you have just this much time. You have like this, the window is cracked this much for the amount of time that you have to profoundly influence these kids. So just be the best parent that you can while, make hay while the sun shines, basically. But when I was crying about, my youth and my beauty, I was wasting it on these idiots. And she was like, here's the thing. You're not. She's like, Terri, you're going to see that when these kids get to be around 25, everything that Vic did before you, that's my husband, and everything that you guys did together, it was all getting in. You're going to watch them. And it's so mind blowing. And I was like, first of all, I have to wait till they're 25. I'm going to blow my brains out. But secondly, I was like, that's amazing. And then when it happened, where each and every one of them now, this is of course many years later, they're all the same. They all build things. They all grow things. They all are the primary cook in their family. They all have children and wives and, but there's so much similarities where they were raised predominantly through a lot of those important years by a single dad who was mom and dad. And it wasn't lost on them. So anyway, that was the longest way around the barn to get back to.
I was riveted listening to you. Thank you for sharing that. You've given me hope. You've given me hope. I don't want to be a widow or be a widower or married to a widow, but you've given me hope. I saw so much of like my future journey. I can like plot my boys' lives through your story.
Yes,
Talk about
please.
being a mentor. You were a parent and a mentor.
Dude, what I'm saying about the teen years is that even if they all look like they might become criminals, if you're not a criminal, it's very possible they will not become criminals, which is amazing. So I'm proof positive. They are proof positive that you can find the straight and narrow, even after a really rough start.
Only Terri could turn this podcast interview into a valuable therapy session for her guests. And for you, I am grateful. I have learned a lot.
Well, I thank you. All right. There's a couple of quotes of yours that I love and that I wanted to just throw out and talk about a little bit, if we may.
Sure.
This one resonated with me so hardcore. Successful people are fairly willing to do what unsuccessful people aren't. So let's discuss.
Yeah, I actually don't think that's even original to me. So I think I changed it up because I couldn't find the source. But there's so much truth in that. Like you, I have this privilege of hosting a podcast with major celebrities and business titans and best-selling authors and four-star generals and on and on and on. People that have done remarkable things. What they have in common is usually an indefatigable work ethic. But they're willing to disrupt themselves more frequently than other people are. That didn't work, no problem, I'll try this. That didn't work, no problem, I'm going to do it again, but slightly differently. Or that didn't work, I'm just going to do it again because I'm convinced it's going to work. It's just they can't see my genius yet. So I interviewed someone just a week ago. I forgot who it was, someone of significant influence. And I asked him, what was the key differentiator between people in your life that have been successful and not? And he said, hard work. I actually think it was like Admiral McCraven. He's a very famous admiral. He led the Osama bin Laden raid. Mm-hmm. And he talked about just the value still of hard work in the era of chat GPT and AI and all things digital. And if you had to ask me, what was the core tenet of my career, moving from, front line to the C-suite, and to the extent I've had professional success, and by many measures I have, two things. One, I always worked with people who believed in me more than I believed in myself in that moment, known as a mentor. And two, I constantly disrupted myself, right? I was a project manager, then a salesperson, a sales leader, a marketing leader, a podcaster, a radio host, a book author, a columnist. I've never had any training on any of those things. I never went to a course on how to write a book or a course on how to write a column for Inc. magazine. I didn't take a course on how to host a iHeartRadio program. I just had moxie. I had guts. And I was willing to take feedback from people like yourself that had experience to say, Scott, do less of that, do more of that. Stop doing that, calibrate that, keep going. I'd forgotten that quote. I think there is massive insight in the simplicity of what separates those who are successful from those who are not. Is those who are successful are just willing to do what those who weren't successful weren't, putting yourself out there. I love the Brene Brown quote. I licensed it for my first book. Loosely said, if you aren't out in the arena getting your ass kicked, I don't care about your opinion. And it's like one of the best three-liners I've ever heard in my life. I've misquoted it, but directionally, it's accurate.
Oh my God, I was obsessed with that quote when it came out, especially working with high-profile clients. The peanut gallery has grown so incredibly large because of the internet and because of social media. Yeah. And it's such great advice. But back to the original thing that we were talking about, there's something about not giving up. And I feel like that for me personally, that was always like my winning formula, is that I will just do it longer than you. Like other people will just quit.
That's it. What you just said is the golden nugget in this interview. People ask me all the time, Scott, why is your podcast so successful? What do I do? I say, keep going. 85% of podcasters quit after 5 or 6 episodes. Keep going. My podcast has been going for 259 weeks. I never missed a week through an episode through the pandemic, always
Same.
on. Keep going. Keep going. Find your posse, find your group, find your niche, find your feedback loop of board of advisors to help you find it, but just keep going.
Another thing you said that was great is about, and I want to highlight this, talking about getting feedback, someone saying, hey, calibrate this, do this a little bit differently. Successful people value the feedback of chosen others. Not all the friggin' people. Not if you are not one of the mother effers who's in the arena doing some shit in your life. No, I don't want your opinion. And why people will, I teach a lot about, obviously I teach about boundaries, but I teach about how when people give you unsolicited advice, like I try not to be so ego driven, but it's so offensive because I'm like, and even my own mother, I mean, I love her, but she's weighing in on stuff she back in the day, not anymore because she has learned, but weighing in on things that she has no idea about. And I'm like, I love you. And I'm not looking for feedback from you.
Can
Like
I
I
add
have,
to that?
yes, please do.
What you said is just, you should be a therapist. You should write a book on boundaries.
Indeed.
I interviewed someone a few weeks ago, a very famous geopolitical strategist on my podcast. I never used this word, but it went viral on YouTube. In a matter of hours, I had 150,000 views on YouTube.
Amazing.
I don't use the word viral. And unfortunately, my team left the comment option open on YouTube. So, 5,000 comments and 4,890 were that the host does not even deserve to live. He's so horrible, right? And that I slaughtered the English language and all these things. And I read them with my son. I read them. Now, keep in mind, this gentleman was a geopolitical strategist, and I named my oldest son Thatcher after Margaret Thatcher, one of my heroes. So there was a whole diatribe on how bad Margaret Thatcher was. I'm sorry, I have a puppy in the room that is insolent. I can't stop him. I'm sorry.
That's
it's
okay.
Part of the charm of my podcast. But it was reading all of these comments about me slaughtering the English language when not everyone knows that I have a lifelong stutter. I have a fairly debilitating speech impediment. So the fact that I'm hosting one of the world's largest leadership podcasts is insane. Of course I'm slaughtering the language. I have a stutter. I've had braces 4 times and Invisalign and headgear and speech coaches and speech pathology. But I'm kicking your ass. So you're kicking my ass on YouTube and your comment, but I'm out there crushing my podcast. The moral of the story is build a board of advisors of people whose opinion really matter because they are invested in your success. You'll take some of their advice, you'll leave some of their advice, but their intent is to help you. And that circle is not on YouTube. That circle is those named people you've picked that you trust them to have high courage conversations with you, to move outside their comfort zone, declare their intent, offer you good advice, and then you choose whether to take it or leave it.
Absolutely. I love it. All right. I have one more question for you, but you guys listening and watching, the book is The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship, 13 Rules to Making a True Impact. The author is Scott Jeffrey Miller. What a pleasure it has been. All right. Here's my question for you, Scott. Personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle and how did you overcome it if you have?
I love this. How long do I have, Doc?
As long as you want.
I did not understand what boundaries were until just a couple of years ago. I'm 55 years old. I thought people that had boundaries were people who were lazy. They wouldn't work on the weekend. They wouldn't respond to an email after 5 o'clock. I generally quoted boundaries with people that were inflexible.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. I've learned a lot about the healthy aspect of boundaries. Again, I apologize. I have an insolent puppy that is that I'm going to just cool off air. I'm sorry for this, but I'm just going to bring him over here because he likes to bark. I never would typically do this, but this is Wilson.
Hi,
so,
baby.
I learned that I was wrong, is that I think setting healthy boundaries is enormously important. I was raised in a middle-class family in Central Florida in the 70s and 80s. My father was a full-time, company executive. My mom was a stay-at-home, full-time caretaker. Mom raised two sons successfully. And I had to begin to set some boundaries with my mother in my teen years because my mother was raised in a very unhealthy family. Both of her parents were alcoholics, always kind of on the run from the rent and from the, Sears Roebuck repair person wanting their bill, whatever it was. And so my mother had a rough upbringing, and therefore she valued stability over everything. Stability over joy, over love, over happiness, over mission, over meaning, over purpose. Stability at all cost was the goal of our family. She would not put that name to this, but I have put that name to that. So my brother followed the prescribed path of the Miller family because you weren't successful unless you earned a badge, doctor, lawyer, chef. My mother valued stability. So my brother went and became a chemical engineer, and then he went to MIT and got a master's in chemical engineering and an MBA and a black belt Six Sigma. My brother's chest is full of badges. Therefore, he's the favorite son. The criminal, Scott, the younger brother. To this day, my mother could not tell you how I earn a living. He has no idea. My mother asked me if I'd gotten my, what is that, the government stimulus check. I'm like, Mom, if you think I'm living and putting 3 sons through private school on a government stimulus, we got to talk, girl, because you don't know what's going on in my life. She doesn't. I love her. She's great. She did her best with the skills she had. I have forgiven her. But I've had to set some boundaries with how I allow my mother to weigh in on anything I do because I know what her value in life is stability. My mother still lives in the same home for 62 years. I've owned 5 homes in 10 years. And so I look like a vagabond compared to what my mom values. And so to answer your question in 2 ways, I've learned that setting healthy boundaries does not mean you are inflexible or that you are lazy. It means that you respect yourself and that you know what role you need others to play in your life and you won't allow them to cross that. That's a horrible definition coming from a psychotherapist, of which you are. But that's what I've learned about boundaries.
That is amazing. I love that so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Tell everyone where they can find you. You have your podcast. It's On Leadership with Scott Miller.
Yes, you can visit greatmentorship.com. That's the website dedicated to the book. There's lots of tools and opportunities there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. I have no boundaries when it comes to social media. You can Google me, and to my wife's horror, she says my name will come up frequently. So thank you for your spotlight and platform today, Terri.
Absolutely. And congratulations on the book. Again, the book is The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship by Scott Jeffrey Miller. Thank you so much, Scott.